Hey everyone, I recently moved from a Pimax Crystal Original to the Pimax Crystal Super Ultra Wide, primarily do iRacing, and I thought it would be good to show you some examples of the settings that I needed to use to make it all come together. All right, let me give you my impressions really quick on the Pimax Super, coming over from the Pimax Crystal Original. So first of all, I'll talk about the setup. Very simple, very straightforward. Plug it in, it does a firmware update, it loads up, correct profile, fired it right up. Again, no issues, no problems or anything like that, so super simple. Pimax has really done a good job of kind of fixing their software for the most part, at least setting it up and making it easy that way. Next thing I'll tell you about is the overall picture quality. Look, it's a much bigger, wider FOV. I'll pull that up on the screen right now so you can kind of see the difference in what I was getting before and after. And that was one of the primary reasons why I got it. So definitely a bigger FOV to the extent that it's going to make a huge difference. You can see on the screen, that's what you're getting, ultimately for the extra, say 15 degrees of field of view on each eye over where I was before. So the clarity, much better as you would expect. The brightness is much brighter than it was before, and the blacks are much blacker. So again, a big step up from the Pimax Original Crystal for sure. Next up, chromatic aberration. One of the challenges that I had with the Crystal was a lot of chromatic aberration on there, just outside of any of the central view, which was frustrating. I can tell you that the Super is much better in terms of the fact that you don't see that unless you're on the far edges of it. So I think that that was a big step up and an improvement. People have talked about Mura, and there is a little bit of that. I found that if I adjust the lighting down by a couple of degrees from 100 to 98, 97, it really eliminates a lot of that Mura effect. It's not really bad, but for some people they can be very susceptible to that. You look under a flat background or a light background, and if you really concentrate, you can see that there's a little bit of some what I would call some discolored or miscolored pixels along a flat background, which is normal really for VR. It's just to the degree and how much you notice that on your headset. So for me, wasn't a huge deal. Didn't really pay much attention to it, especially when I adjusted the brightness settings as well in the panel. And then last thing, comfort and weight. A little bit, this is going to take a little bit of an adjustment. I think with the Crystal, the battery on the back allowed for it to be a little bit more balanced. This one, using the top strap, is going to be needed, and I'm still adjusting it to make sure it fits nice and comfortable on my face. But overall, certainly lighter, and certainly a little easier to kind of handle. So that's my initial impressions on the Super Ultra Wide. Now I'm going to jump in and show you the settings that I'm using to do the testing and the goals. So my setup is a 9800X3D with a 5090 GPU and 32 gigabytes of RAM, so a pretty beefy setup. And then overall for the goals, they were to have a 90 Hertz refresh rate, running at the native resolution with minimal restarts, so that I didn't have to change a lot depending on the track conditions or the specific track. Keep that easy. And then lastly, the testing that I did was mostly GT3 cars and NASCAR. I put a field of about 20 cars out there, started mid-pack, late afternoon, and then I did this testing with various tracks and on wet and dry conditions, and I'll go through that with my setup as well to show you how I achieved what I did. Alright, so let's go into the Pimax settings first, and I'll show you where I'm sitting at here. So everything is set to defaults, 90 Hertz refresh rate, brightness I left it at 100, and then none of the other things are turned on. Under the game settings, set to full resolution, no GPU scaling is turned on, sharpness is set to 0.80. Everything else is set to default, quad views, hidden mask area. Nothing here under general other than we're running Pimax Open XR. So those are the settings that I'm using for the Pimax Super. For my test, I have foveated rendering turned on with allow eye tracking, and you can see where I've set this up to default under the display tab. Under the graphics tabs, you can see on the screen what I have set up. On this section here, if it's raining, I'll turn off crowds. Otherwise, I leave everything as is. Scrolling down here to mirrors, I just use the virtual mirror. Though in some tracks, and if you want that realism, turn off the virtual mirror. You can set the mirror max to 2 or 3 or 4, whatever you're going to be using on that, but definitely you don't need both. That will certainly cause problems from a performance issue. And for me, if I had 160 or 170 degree field of view, I'd probably run real mirrors, but I don't, so virtual mirror is going to give me the best balance between what I actually have and what I can do that way. You can see the other things that I've got on here. Draw cars 30 and 4, draw pits is set to minimum, and then dynamic level of detail. All right, let me show you another thing related to the dynamic LOD. So we're here at the track, and you can see in the distance here, and I've got the display on here, so hopefully you can see through the transparency here, but there's buildings off into the distance here that are going to pop in. So if I hit play on here, let's go ahead and do this and hit play, and you watch those buildings just above the F right there. See how they pop in, more detail, and then the bridge comes in eventually, right? And a lot of people don't like that popping in and out, right? So if I hit back, you're going to see those things kind of go back to where they were, right? So I'm going to go back to the bridge, and there where we are just above the F. Now you can get rid of that if you want to. Now notice how I'm sitting here, and you know, our overhead is 31, is 30% here. So if I go to settings on here, now I'm going to go down to this LOD, and I'm going to go ahead and drop this to 40. All right, so I'm just going to take this all the way down to 40, and then I'm going to hit apply. Remember, we were at roughly 30 and 30 before I went into the menu. I'm going to hit apply. Now all of the things go away, all the pop-ins go away, right? So you can see the building, and you can see the bridge now that's there, right? But look at what's happened to my GPU and CPU headroom. I've lost over 10% on my CPU and over 10% on my GPU headroom just by doing that. So if I hit play, you don't get any pop-ins outside of a couple things from the trees, which is great, but at a pretty big cost over here. Now here's the dilemma, is that certain tracks have different pop-ins that are going to have a different sort of effect, and those are what sometimes cause those stutters, depending on the start of a race or whatever. So if I set it back to 90 and I'm going to hit apply, and now you can watch it goes back up to 30 and 30, or somewhere close to 30, and then now I get the pop-ins again, you know, again just above the F for, you know, FU, but basically those pop-ins will be there. But notice I clear another 10% on both my CPU and GPU. So I share that just because a lot of people will go into these settings and they may start messing with these things by changing the only increase, decrease, and all this other kind of stuff, and that could be some problems. So I'm not going to tell you specifically what to do. A lot of people, the pop-ins are really important that they don't see them. Other people don't really care, but adjusting this can have a significant impact on your overall performance of the rest of the stuff that you're driving around. So hopefully that kind of helps explain that just a little bit. And then shader quality set to high, particle detail is set to low. Shadow maps, let's talk about this for a little bit. Shadow maps is, for me, always needs to be on, whether it's rain or no rain or anything like that, because while this is a big performance hit, one of the things that I've seen is when it's raining, it makes it look gloomy. If it's off, it's like a sunny rain, where it's cloudy but the sun is still out, sort of. Okay, related to the shadows, you can see those on the screen here. The biggest difference is we're going to turn off shadow maps. And again, you can look at the headroom, 42 and 24%. I'm going to turn this off altogether, hit apply. All right, now notice how the screen got a lot brighter. There's no shadows on the car other than the slight shadow underneath. There's no more shadows in the car other than the artificial ones. You can see how it just makes it like there's a light inside my car. There's no additional shadows. but we gain a significant amount of headroom from 54 to 43. So again, I'll go back in and turn the shadows back on. In main view, hit apply. Now I get the shadows inside the car, and you can see the shadows on the cars ahead, and then you can see there's a significant drop of about 14% by just turning those shadows on. For sure. And then with object self-shadowing, this is going to be where your grandstands shine shadows on themselves, basically, or objects create their own shadows independent of the sun drawing shadows, basically. So this one is a little bit of a performance hit. It's not really necessary. I think it adds a little bit more to the detail around the track, but isn't huge. So you could turn this off if you wanted to. And then definitely in main view wherever possible, because this is the one that's going to give me shadows of the cars, right? So this is where you see those extra shadows on the cars moving around from the side, and this one's really important. If it's raining, I won't have object self shadows will be turned off, and then in main view here this will be set to off, and then that I find for the most part gives me the headroom that I need for a rain race. Night shadows set to on. The PC shadow map filter, I don't think this really has any difference in VR is what I understand, so it doesn't seem like this does anything no matter if I set this to 16 or off, to be honest, so I just kind of leave it alone. And then a little bit further I've got sharpening on. HDR is another one that's interesting. Again, some tracks, some situations where you have plenty of overhead, you could turn this on. Other tracks, it just seems like it pushes you over the limit, so I just leave it off because while I love what it does, the downside is that I don't always know until I go into a session to determine based on those conditions if I'm able to do that or not. So I have it set to off, otherwise I'd have to jump out of the sim and turn it on and so on. So that's the deal. So MSAA is set to 4x with this simple filter. You could turn on more sharpening with this, but I find with the Pimax Super you really just don't need any additional sharpening than what I've already enabled in the other sections, and changing this would require you to restart the sim anyway. So I just have this set to simple. So those are the settings that I used for my test. All right, so that's the summary of what we have here. So with those settings, I was able to sustain a 90 frames per second frame rate in iRacing, and continue to be at native resolution as well. Again, I think the quality is outstanding. It works extremely well, and I was really pleased and surprised by how the 9800 and the 5090, working with the higher resolution Super, held it together, to be honest with you, and it's really maintaining it. So hey, what can I tell you? It does a really nice job. If you have any other questions or thoughts or ideas that you're doing or running, please leave your comments below or get in touch with me directly. Love to hear about other people's experiences or settings maybe that they're doing that gives them even better performance as well. So that being said, appreciate it. We'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.